Picture this. The year is 1532. You're standing in Cusco, the capital of the largest empire in the Americas. Around you, 80,000 people watch in absolute silence as a young girl is led through the plaza. She's maybe 13 years old. Her hair is braided with exquisite precision. Her dress is woven from vicuña wool so fine it takes 6 months to make. Gold pins shaped like llamas hold her shawl in place. She walks slowly, deliberately. Her face is calm, almost serene. Here's what you need to understand. She's not being led to her death. She's being elevated to godhood, and she knows it. This is Capacocha, the most sophisticated human sacrifice system ever documented in the Americas. And what makes it truly horrifying isn't the violence, it's the precision. The Inca didn't sacrifice randomly. They built a machine. A system so calculated, so bureaucratic, that when Spanish chroniclers first documented it, they struggled to believe what they were recording. If you believe the documented evidence of history's darkest systems must be remembered, consider subscribing. Your support helps uncover more accounts that textbooks won't teach. Now, let's understand how this machine actually worked. Act 1 of the system. The selection here is what makes Capacocha different from every other sacrifice ritual in history. They didn't choose victims. They chose candidates. The process started years before the actual sacrifice. Inca administrators traveled to every corner of the empire, from Ecuador to Chile, searching for children who met specific criteria. Not just any children. Aclas, the chosen ones. Think about what this means. Imperial officials maintained records. Registries of girls between 6 and 14 who were physically perfect. No scars, no deformities, no blemishes. They documented their families, their lineages, their village of origin. This wasn't spiritual selection. It was administrative screening. Once identified, these girls were taken from their families, not kidnapped, but honored. Their parents were told their daughter had been chosen for the highest privilege in the empire. To become an Aclla, a virgin of the sun, the family received gifts, land, status, exemption from labor tax. The girls were sent to Aclla, houses of the chosen, where they spent years learning to weave perfect textiles, brew perfect chicha, perform perfect rituals. They were trained like priests, educated like nobility, and they had no idea they were being prepared for death. Archaeological evidence from Aclla sites across Peru reveals structured dormitories, weaving workshops, brewing facilities. These weren't prisons. They were schools, industrial preparation centers for human sacrifice. Capacocha victims weren't killed in terror. They were cultivated over years, refined, perfected. Here's the thing that should disturb you. The Inca weren't monsters. They were bureaucrats. Act 2 of the system. The escalation on April 15, 1532. A 13-year-old girl known today as La Doncella de Llullaillaco began the final year of her life. We know this because in 1999, archaeologists found her body on a mountaintop in Argentina. 6,739 meters above sea level, frozen perfectly for 467 years. And when they analyzed her hair, strand by strand, they discovered something that rewrites everything we thought we understood about Capacocha. Her hair preserved a biological timeline, a 12-month record of everything she consumed before her death. Here's what that timeline reveals. For most of her life, her diet was typical for an Inca commoner. Potatoes, corn, quinoa, standard peasant nutrition. Then, 12 months before her death, everything changed. Her diet shifted dramatically. High-status foods, meat, luxury grains, foods reserved for nobility. Her body started showing markers of coca leaf consumption, not recreational amounts, ritual quantities. Think about what this tells us. The preparation phase was exactly 1 year long, precisely calculated. administratively scheduled. But here's what makes this especially sinister. The coca consumption wasn't constant. It escalated. In month 1, trace amounts. By month 6, daily doses. By the final month, her hair showed coca levels consistent with near constant consumption. Combined with chicha, fermented corn beer, administered in quantities that would intoxicate an adult, she was being drugged, progressively, systematically, for an entire year. The purpose wasn't to sedate her. It was to transform her psychological state, to make her believe she was becoming divine, to ensure that when the final moment came, she would walk willingly into death. This wasn't primitive superstition. This was pharmacological conditioning. If this level of systematic preparation doesn't make you question what other calculated systems are hiding in history's shadows, you might be missing the lesson. We're only beginning to understand how empires weaponized belief. Let's finish the journey. Act 3 of the system. The architecture of death. The final stage of Capacocha began with a procession, not to a temple, to a mountain. The Inca believed the highest peaks were sacred, portals to the divine, and Capacocha victims were walked to the summit of volcanoes like Llullaillaco, over 6,700 meters high, in the oxygen-starved death zone, where even modern climbers struggle to breathe. La Doncella walked that entire distance. At 13 years old, in thin air that suffocates adults. Coca and chicha made this possible. Her body was so saturated with stimulants that she could walk through conditions that would kill an unprepared person within hours. At the summit, a stone platform had been built, not improvised. Purpose-built infrastructure. Archaeological surveys since 1954 have documented over 30 Capacocha sites across the Andes, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Watu, each with stone shrines constructed specifically for sacrifice. This was imperial architecture, funded, designed, maintained. La Doncella was dressed in her finest textiles. Gold figurines were placed beside her. Pottery filled with chicha. Food for the gods. Then she sat. And she didn't resist. Here's what the autopsy revealed in 1999. No signs of violence. No trauma. No restraints. Her internal organs were perfectly preserved, frozen so rapidly that ice crystals didn't damage cellular structure. She died from hypothermia, sitting calmly, probably unconscious from altitude and intoxication. Her body temperature dropped until her heart stopped. The cold mummified her in hours. And then the empire forgot her. For 467 years, she sat on that mountaintop, perfectly preserved, waiting for archaeologists to find her and reveal the system that created her. Here's what haunts me about this story. La Doncella wasn't a victim of chaos. She was a product of deliberate imperial infrastructure, a system that spanned thousands of kilometers, that mobilized administrators, priests, architects, pharmacologists. The Inca Empire lasted only 200 years, but in that time, they built a human sacrifice system sophisticated enough to rival any industrial operation. Think about the psychology. These children believed they were ascending to divinity. They walked willingly into death because their entire reality had been engineered to make them believe this was the highest honor imaginable. That's not primitive. That's terrifying precision. Since 1954, archaeologists have identified over 30 Capacocha sites. Each contains children, mostly girls, aged 6 to 15, all with evidence of coca consumption, all with luxury grave goods, all at altitudes above 5,000 meters. Some, like La Doncella, were frozen. Others were naturally mummified in dry mountain caves. But the pattern is always the same: systematic, bureaucratic, calculated. This was policy, not madness. The Spanish conquistadors documented Capacocha extensively in the 1530s and 1540s. Chroniclers like Bernabé Cobo and Cristobal de Molina recorded detailed accounts from Inca priests and survivors who witnessed these rituals. But for centuries, historians dismissed these accounts as exaggeration. Colonial propaganda, justification for conquest. Then we found the bodies, and we realized the Spanish weren't exaggerating. If anything, they underestimated the scale. Here's the question we have to confront. How do you build a system that convinces children to walk willingly toward death? How do you maintain that system across an empire of 12 million people? How do you make sacrifice feel like salvation? The answer isn't religion, it's infrastructure. The Inca built roads. They built warehouses. They built bureaucracies that tracked tribute, labor, production. And within that same administrative framework, they built Capacocha. La Doncella's story doesn't end on that mountaintop. In 2007, her body was placed in a temperature-controlled display in Salta, Argentina. Visitors can see her face, still serene, still dressed in her sacred textiles. She looks like she's sleeping. But she's not. She's evidence. Proof that empires don't just control land, they control belief. And when you control belief, you can convince people to do anything, even die smiling. That's the lesson the Inca Empire left frozen on a mountaintop. The most dangerous kind of power isn't violence. It's the power to make victims grateful for their own destruction. If this exposed a system you never learned about in school, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep uncovering the history they tried to erase. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next investigation. The past isn't dead. It's just waiting to be remembered.